The gray station smelled like metal and old air. Not the kind of old that comes from history, the kind that comes from things being sealed away for too long. Nora Wells noticed at the moment the airlock closed behind her. She took one slow breath, let it settle in her lungs, and kept walking. Suri stayed close behind her. He was 24 years old and had never been this far from human space. She could hear it in the way his boots hit the floor. Too careful, too quiet, like he was afraid of making noise in a place that was already listening. "You okay?" she asked, not turning around. "Yes," he said. Then, after a pause, "No. Maybe." "Good," she said. "Honest is better." The Gray Meridian had been a trade station once, decades ago, before the border disputes made commerce between humans and the Verith impossible. Now it floated in the space between, not claimed by either side, not really belonging to anyone. That made it the only place both sides were willing to sit in the same room. The Verith escorts met them at the corridor junction. 3 of them, tall and thin, with wide-set eyes that reflected light at a slight delay, like the signal had to travel a little further inside them before it registered. They said nothing. They pointed. Nora followed. The room they were taken to was not a conference room. She knew that before she stepped inside. Conference rooms had tables centered, chairs equal, lighting neutral. This room had the table pushed slightly to one side. The chair meant for her was lower than the one across from it. The light above her position was brighter, while the other side of the table sat in comfortable shadow. The floor beneath her chair hummed at a frequency she couldn't quite hear but could feel in the back of her molars. She had read about this. The Verith Psychological Division had been studied by human intelligence for 3 years. Low-grade sound frequencies to agitate the nervous system. Asymmetric lighting to create subconscious feelings of exposure. Temperature gradients. She could already feel the floor was colder on her side. All of it designed to make a subject feel small, watched, and off-balance before a single word was spoken. She sat down. She put her hands flat on the table. She looked at the empty chair across from her and waited. Suri stood near the wall. He had been told he was there as an observer only. She had told him before they arrived, "Whatever happens, don't speak unless I ask you to." He had nodded like he understood. She hoped he did. The door on the other side opened 4 minutes later. She had counted. The Verith who entered was not large, but he moved like he was. Drev Ackle. She knew him from the briefing files. Lead interrogator of the Collective's diplomatic division. 42 confirmed successful psychological breakdowns of enemy negotiators. 0 recorded failures. He sat across from her. He folded his hands. He looked at her, and he said nothing. This was the opening. She knew it. Silence used as pressure. Let the subject fill it. Let them apologize for existing in the space. Let them offer something just to make the quiet stop. Most people lasted under 2 minutes before they spoke. Some lasted less than 30 seconds. Nora looked back at him. She noticed the way he held his shoulders, precise, controlled, but with a faint rigidity near the left side that suggested the position was maintained rather than natural. She noticed that his eyes moved across her face in a pattern, left eye, right eye, mouth, hands, a reading pattern, systematic. She noticed that he blinked slightly less than was comfortable, probably trained. She let the silence stay. 1 minute passed. 2. She watched the faint shift in his expression, so small it was almost nothing. A tightening near the outer edge of his right eye. He had not expected to still be waiting. 3 minutes. She spoke. "Is that chair comfortable?" she asked. He did not answer immediately. His reading pattern stopped. It restarted. "The chair," she said again, gently, with no edge in her voice. "It looks like the supports are set for a wider frame. You look like you're holding yourself into it rather than sitting in it. That must be tiring." Drev Ackle was quiet for a moment. Then he said, in clean and careful human standard, "You were given files about this station." "I was," she said. "I was also given files about you. But I thought I'd start with something real." He looked at her the way someone looks at a lock they expected to open on the first try. "We will begin the formal session tomorrow," he said. He stood. He left. The door closed. Suri exhaled like he had been holding it since they landed. "That's it? That was the whole first session?" Nora picked up her bag from the floor. That was enough for today. What did you learn? She thought about the way Drevakal had paused before answering, the way his reading pattern had stuttered, the way he had ended the session himself, quietly, without explanation, like a man who needed to go somewhere private and think. He's never had someone ask him about himself before, she said. Not like that. Not without wanting something from it. She walked toward the door. The hum in the floor continued beneath her feet, steady and useless. And that matters. Suri asked. It's the only thing that ever does, she said. The second session started with a lie, not a small one. A careful, fully constructed lie. The kind that takes time to build, the kind that has weight to it. Drevakal set a data tablet on the table between them and slid it forward before he had even fully sat down. On the screen was a communication log. Human encryption headers. Admiral Holt's signature at the top. Your fleet commander has been in contact with the Varith Council directly, Drevakal said. Private channel. For 11 days. Nora looked at the tablet. She did not touch it. He has offered them the 3 outer relay stations in exchange for the collective withdrawing support from the border dispute. Drevakal continued. You were not informed of this. You were sent here as a display. A human face to suggest good faith while the real negotiation happened elsewhere. He waited. She looked up from the tablet. How long have you been doing this job? He paused. That is not relevant. I'm curious, she said simply. You built that document carefully. The header formatting is correct. The timestamp syntax matches human fleet standard. Someone studied our systems to get that right. That takes time. I was wondering if that was your work or if you have a team. Drevakal looked at her for a long moment. You are not going to address the content of what I showed you. It isn't real, she said, and you know that I know that. So I'm more interested in the work behind it than in pretending to be upset. A short silence. Most subjects, he said, slowly, begin questioning their commanders within 4 minutes of seeing fabricated evidence of betrayal. You have been in this room for 7 minutes. I've sat with people in worse rooms, she said. People who had actually been betrayed. By real people who actually love them. Once you've seen what real betrayal looks like, a good forgery is just a forgery. He pulled the tablet back. He set aside. He folded his hands on the table in that careful, maintained way she had noticed the day before. Tell me about Suri, he said. Your colleague. He's young, she said. Nervous. Genuinely kind. He filed an internal report last night, Drevakal said. About your conduct. He expressed concern that your methods are too passive for this environment. That you are not taking the situation seriously. Nora tilted her head slightly. Did he? Yes. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I don't believe that either. But even if it were true, it wouldn't change anything I'm doing here. You have no reaction to the possibility of being undermined by your own colleague. I have a reaction, she said. I just don't think fear is a useful one. Drevakal studied her. The reading pattern, left eye, right eye, mouth, hands, moved across her face again. You were a crisis counselor, he said, before the diplomatic service. Yes. You spoke to people who wanted to end their lives. Sometimes. And you stopped them. She shook her head. No, I sat with them. The stopping, if it happened, they did that themselves. I just made sure they weren't alone while they decided. He was quiet for longer than usual after that. She watched the rigidity in his left shoulder. It was still there, still held. You asked me questions about myself, he said finally. Every session, every deflection you make eventually turns back toward me. Is this a technique? Is caring about the person across from you a technique? For you it might be. She considered that. That's fair, she said. I won't pretend my work hasn't shaped how I talk to people. But no, I'm not running a script on you. I'm actually curious. Why? Because you are very good at finding where something hurts, she said. I've watched you work, through the files, through yesterday, through today. You are precise and patient, and you clearly understand pain very well. But in everything I've read about you, in every session on record, you have never once asked a subject why something hurts. Only where. He did not answer. That gap, she said, is what I'm curious about. The hum on the floor continued. Somewhere in the station, something cycled through a pressure equalizer. A low sound almost felt more than heard. Drevakal stood. He walked to the door. He stopped with his hand near the frame. You were trying to make me feel understood, he said, so that I lower my approach. I'm trying to understand you, she said. Those are different things. One of them has a goal. The other one is just true. He left without responding that I in the observation room above. Elder Roval had been watching since the session began. He was the oldest member of the Varith Diplomatic Council and had overseen 40 years of psychological operations. He had seen subjects break in minutes. He had seen strong one's last days. He had never seen one do this. He opened a new file on his console and began taking notes. Not on Nora's weaknesses, as the session protocol required, but on her methods. On the specific moments where Drevackel's pattern stuttered. On the places where being trained to find pain had gone quiet instead, that he labeled the file simply, the human approach. Then he kept watching. On the third day, Drevackel came in with equipment that IT was not large, a flat emitter about the size of a hand, placed on his side of the table without explanation. Nora recognized it from the intelligence files. A focused sensory modulator. It would pulse at intervals just below the range of conscious hearing, triggering low-level stress responses in human nervous systems. Faster heart rate, shallow breathing, a crawling sense of unease that the subject could never fully trace back to a source that IT was, by all accounts, extremely effective. Drevackel sat down, set the emitter on the table, and looked at her. His expression had not changed from the day before, or the day before that. Steady, patient, a man who had never once needed to rush, that he reached toward the emitter. Can I share something with you before we start? Nora asked that he stopped. This was not in the pattern. Subjects did not open sessions. They responded to them. It won't take long, she said. Her voice was calm, the same way a river is calm. Not because nothing is moving, but because the movement is deep. He leaned back. He permitted it the way someone opens a door expecting to find nothing. My mother died 4 years ago, Nora said. He said nothing. His reading pattern started, left eye, right eye, mouth, hands. She had been sick for a long time, Nora continued. Not the kind of sick where things get better. The kind where you spend a year slowly learning to say goodbye before you have to actually do it. She paused. Near the end, she was afraid. Not of dying exactly. She'd had time to get used to that idea. She was afraid of the moment itself, of what it would feel like, of whether she'd be alone. The emitter sat untouched on the table. I stayed with her, Nora said, for 3 days at the end, not doing anything, not fixing anything. There was nothing left to fix. I just stayed. I held her hand when she wanted that. I sat in the chair when she didn't. I talked when she wanted talking, and I was quiet when she wanted quiet. She looked at her hands on the table. She died on a Tuesday morning. It was raining. She wasn't afraid when it happened. I don't know if that was because of me or just because the fear had run out on its own, but I know she wasn't alone. The room was very quiet. The hum on the floor continued. Indifferent, Drevackel had not moved. His reading pattern had stopped somewhere around the word Tuesday and had not restarted. That experience, Nora said, is the reason I'm good at my job. Not because it made me tough, because it taught me that being present, really present, without an agenda, without trying to manage the situation, is the most useful thing one person can offer another. She looked up at him. I'm telling you this because you were about to use that. She glanced at the emitter. And I wanted you to know that whatever it does to my body, it won't change what I'm doing here. I've sat in harder rooms than this one. Drevackel looked at the emitter. He looked at her. He did not turn on. A silence settled between them. But it was different from the silences before. The earlier ones had been tactical. This one was something else. It had weight to it, but not the weight of a contest. More like the weight of 2 people standing in the same weather. The Varith, he said slowly, do not remain with the dying. She waited. When a Varith enters terminal decline, they are moved to a processing facility. Their knowledge and experience are documented. Their biological material is returned to the collective resource cycle. He paused. It is considered the most logical arrangement. Is it? She asked. Not challenging, just asking. It removes the burden of grief from those who remain, he said. Grief disrupts function. A disrupted collective is a vulnerable one. The arrangement was implemented after he stopped. After what? She asked, Gently, he looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "It is not relevant to the negotiation." "No," she agreed. "It isn't." Another silence. He straightened slightly in the chair, the old rigidity returning. "You are attempting to create personal disclosure," he said, "to lower the professional distance between us." "I shared something true," she said. "I wasn't trying to do anything with it. All communication has purpose." "Yes," she said, "but not all purpose is strategy." He looked at the emitter again. Then he picked it up and placed it back in a bag beside his chair. Nora did not react. She did not smile or nod or show any sign of having won something. She just sat, present, the same as she had been every minute since she arrived. "Tomorrow," Drevakal said, "we will begin the formal exchange framework." "I'll be here," she said. He left. Suri was waiting in the corridor. He fell in a step beside her without speaking. They walked back toward the human quarter in silence. After a minute, he said, quietly, "I checked. He didn't turn on." "I know," she said. "How did you know he wouldn't?" She thought about the way the emitter had sat untouched on the table while she talked. About the way Drevakal's pattern had stopped and stayed stopped. "Because he was listening," she said. "And nobody turns on a noise machine when they're actually listening." They came in pairs. Point two new Verith entered the session room before Nora had fully sat down. She had not been told to expect them. Neither had Drevakal, from the look of it. There was a brief, almost invisible stillness in him when they entered, gone in less than a second. But she caught it. Their names, she would learn later, were Sev and Oren. Both from the Collective's Advanced Division. Both younger than Drevakal, moving with the particular confidence of people who had not yet been surprised by anything. They sat on either side of the table, flanking the empty chair across from Nora. Drevakal remained standing near the wall. Sev spoke first. "We have reviewed the session records. We have identified several productive threads that were not fully developed." Oren spoke immediately after, overlapping slightly. "Your mission parameters have not been shared with your own fleet command in full. We have reason to believe Admiral Holt is unaware of your secondary directives." Sev again. "The Human Council approved this negotiation under terms you were not briefed on. You were selected specifically because of your psychological profile, compliant under pressure, unlikely to escalate." Oren, "Your colleague Suri submitted a secondary request to return to human space 2 nights ago. He has not told you this." The technique was layered and fast. 2 voices, overlapping information, none of it giving her enough time to address one claim before the next arrived. It was designed to create a feeling of being surrounded, of information coming from all sides, of the ground shifting. Nora reached in her bag. She pulled out a thermos. Both Sev and Oren stopped. She unscrewed the cap slowly, poured herself a cup of coffee, and set the thermos on the table. The smell of it, dark roast, slightly bitter, very human, moved through the cold station air. "I brought enough for 2 more cups if anyone wants some," she said. "I don't know if caffeine affects Verith physiology. I didn't want to assume." Sev and Oren looked at each other, then at Drevakal, then back at her. "We are in the middle of a formal session," Sev said. "You were talking," she said pleasantly. "I was listening. I could do both." She took a sip. "You were saying something about my secondary directives?" Oren recalibrated first. "You are attempting to disrupt the session rhythm." "I'm drinking coffee," she said. "But while I'm doing that, I want to be honest with both of you, because I think you deserve that." She set the cup down. "I know what you're doing. I know what each specific thing you said is designed to produce in me. The overlapping voices to prevent processing time. The authority betrayal angle to create isolation. The colleague doubt insertion to break trust in my immediate support." She paused. "I've read your division's methodology files. Not all of them. Human intelligence doesn't have everything, but enough." Neither Sev nor Oren spoke. "I'm not telling you this to embarrass you," she said. "I'm telling you because pretending I don't see it would be disrespectful, and I'd rather talk to you like adults." She looked at Drevakal against the wall. His expression was unreadable, but he had not moved to stop her. "Here is what I actually know," she said, addressing all 3 of them now. "People on both sides of this border are scared. They've been scared for a long time. Scared people make bad decisions. Not because they're bad people, but because fear is loud and it convinces you that the only options are the fast ones. She wrapped both hands around her cup. I'm not here to give your council what it wants or to give my admiral what he wants. I'm here because if we don't find something real, some actual common ground built on something true, then whatever agreement we write will fall apart in 5 years, and we'll be back to the same place with more people hurt. Oren said, You cannot know our council's motivations. No, she agreed. But I know what fear looks like in any species. And I've been watching it in this room for 4 days. Another silence. The coffee cooled slowly in her cup. Sev looked at Drevakal. Something passed between them. Some quiet Verith communication that Nora couldn't fully read, but she had learned to watch for. Drevakal pushed off the wall and came to the table for the first time in the session. He sat across from Nora in his usual chair. You said something true on the second day, he said. You said that I know where things hurt, but not why. I remember. Elder Roval contacted me last night. He has requested that tomorrow's session be extended. He wants to be present. Nora raised an eyebrow slightly. The elder himself? Yes. Sev and Oren looked less certain than they had a few minutes ago. Their coordinated rhythm had not come back. Is that unusual? Nora asked. In 40 years of operation, Drevakal said, Elder Roval has attended 3 sessions personally. All 3 resulted in major policy changes. She looked at him. And how do you feel about that? Drevakal almost, had something in his expression that was not purely professional. I do not know, he said. I have not yet decided what to call it. Back in the human quarter, Suri was in the middle of writing a personal log when Nora returned. She set the thermos on the small table between their bunks and sat down across from him. Did you request a return transfer 2 nights ago? She asked. He looked at the floor. I looked at the form. I didn't submit it. She nodded. Okay, I'm sorry. Don't be, she said. Being scared and staying anyway, that's not something to apologize for. She poured the last of the coffee into the cap and slid it across to him. That's just being human. Elder Roval was smaller than she had expected. From the files, he had seemed like a figure of institution, old, important, immovable. The being who walked into the session room that morning was all of those things, but he was also simply old. His movements were slow and deliberate in the way that comes from having learned, over a long life, that rushing rarely improves anything that he did not sit at the table. He took a chair near the wall, the same position Drevakal had stood in the day before, and he settled into it with the stillness of someone who had come to observe and intended to do exactly that. Sev and Oren were not present that Drevakal sat across from Nora. He had no tablet, no imite, no prepared documents. He had come, as far as she could tell, with nothing. He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, Do you ever feel afraid? She had been ready for a lot of things that morning. She had not been ready for that. All the time, she said. In this room, yes. He seemed to process that. You do not show it. I know, but it's there. She kept her voice even. The first day when I sat down and felt the floor humming and realized exactly what this room was built to do, I was afraid. Not of you specifically, more of getting it wrong, of saying something that closes a door that was already barely open. And yet you stayed. Yes. Why? She thought about how to answer that. Not performing the thought, actually having it, because it was a real question and it deserved a real answer. Because the fear of failing the people who need this to work is bigger than the fear of what happens to me in this room, she said. That's it. There's no better version. It's just, one fear is louder than the other. Drevakal was quiet for a long time. Near the wall, Elder Roval had not moved. We have a word, Drevakal said slowly in the old Verith language. It has no direct translation into human standard. The closest approximation would be the willingness to remain in a situation that causes pain, because leaving would cause more pain to something outside yourself. We call that courage, Nora said. Your definition of courage is built around the presence of fear. Ours was not. What was yours built around? He paused, long enough that she wondered if he was going to answer at all. Logic, he said. The Verith definition of courage was the correct choice made under external pressure. Emotion was not part of the calculation. He looked at the table surface between them. This definition was adopted formally 311 years ago. After the silence, she waited. She had learned to wait. The silence was not in the files your intelligence services have, he said. It is not something the collective shares. But he stopped. Started again. 312 years ago, the Verith experienced an event. A plague, but not of the body. It moved through our population as a grief response. A collective psychological collapse triggered by a series of losses in rapid succession. 3 colony systems. A generation of young. A cultural archive destroyed in a territorial conflict. His voice remained level, but it was the level of someone holding something heavy very carefully. Within 2 years, 40% of the collective's functioning population had ceased to operate. Not from injury, from grief. They simply stopped. The room was absolutely still. The survivors made a decision, he said. They structured the emotional responses out of Verith society. Processing centers. Logic frameworks. The removal of rituals that had previously been tied to loss. They built a civilization that could not be brought down by feeling. He looked up at her. His eyes, wide-set and reflective, held something she had not seen in them before. It worked, he said. We have not had another silence. We are stable, functional, efficient, a pause. And we have been using the tools built from that survival to dismantle the emotional capacity of every species we come into contact with. Because we believe, because we were taught, that emotion is the thing that breaks civilizations. Nora did not speak immediately. She let what he had said sit in the room, the way you let a wound breathe before you touch it. I am so sorry, she said. That happened to your people. Drevakal looked at her. His reading pattern did not start. He was not analyzing her expression. He was, for the first time since she had arrived, simply looking. You grieve for us, he said. It was not a question. It was something closer to disbelief. Yes, she said. We are not in distress. It was 3 centuries ago. I know. I am so anyway. For what it cost you. For what you had to give up to survive it. She kept her voice steady. You didn't lose emotion because you were weak. You lost it because you were desperate, and it was the only way you knew to stop the bleeding. That isn't a flaw. That's just what surviving looks like sometimes. Something changed in Drevakal. It was not dramatic. It was not a collapse or a breakdown or a moment of visible emotion. It was more like a structural thing, the way a wall doesn't fall but shifts slightly when the pressure that was holding it rigid is no longer necessary. He reached into his folder. He placed a document on the table. These are the actual terms, he said, not the ones the council prepared for psychological leverage. The real ones. What the collective genuinely needs from the border agreement. Nora looked at the document, then at him. Thank you, she said. Elder Roval stood from his chair by the wall. He crossed the room slowly and placed a hand, flat-palmed, a Verith gesture she recognized as formal acknowledgement, on the table between them. Continue, he said, and then he left. The prisoner exchange happened on a Wednesday. 11 humans had been held in Verith processing facilities for 8 months following a border incident neither side had fully admitted to causing. 11 Verith had been held in human fleet detention under similar silence. They were returned on the Gray Meridian's central dock, one group walking toward the other across a floor that still hummed faintly from the station's old systems. Nora watched from the side. She did not make it about herself. She never did. Suri stood beside her. He had stopped flinching at the sound of Verith voices 2 days ago. She had noticed, but said nothing. The agreement itself had taken 2 more days to finalize after the session where Drevakal had placed the real terms on the table. Real negotiations were different from psychological ones. They were slower, messier, full of small technical disagreements and translation problems and moments where both sides said the same thing in different words and spent an hour realizing it. But they were real, and real was the only kind that lasted. The border relay arrangement was straightforward. A shared monitoring zone. Neither side would station military assets within a designated corridor. Trade vessels would resume on a limited, supervised basis within 90 days. A formal diplomatic communication channel, an actual one, with agreed protocols and response timelines, would be established within 30. It was not a grand piece. It was not the end of anything, but it was a door, and it was open. Admiral Holt had read the terms from orbit and transmitted back a single line. How did you get them to this? Nora had written back. I listened. There had been a long pause before his acknowledgement came through. She suspected he was deciding whether that was a satisfying answer. She didn't wait to find out that on the last morning before departure, Drevackle found her in the corridor near the human quarter. He was alone, which was unusual. He had the manner of someone who had made a decision that cost him something and had not yet decided if the cost was acceptable. In my official report to the collective, he said, I have classified your method as an unidentified psychological technique, resistant to standard countermeasures. Origin unclear. She looked at him. Is that what it was? I don't know what else to call it. You could call it talking to someone like they matter. He considered that for a moment. That is not a technique. No, she said. It isn't. He was quiet. The corridor around them was empty. That particular kind of empty that feels deliberate, like the space itself is giving you room. I have a question, he said. Not for the record. Not for the report. Okay. The silence, the event I described. If you had been there, if you had been present with someone during that time, he stopped. He reframed it. Is there a way to sit with grief without being destroyed by it? She thought about her mother's room, the rain on a Tuesday morning, the hand she had held through the night, and the chair she had sat in when holding was too much. Yes, she said. You don't have to carry it. You just have to let it move through you and not fight it. It passes. It changes shape. It never fully leaves, but it stops being something that stops you. The Verith who designed the new social structures after the silence believed that the only way to survive grief was to eliminate the attachment that caused it. They were wrong, she said. Not cruelly, just clearly. The attachment is the point. The love is the point. The grief is just proof that something mattered. She paused. Eliminating attachment doesn't protect you from loss. It just means you were never fully there for the things you still had. He stood with that for a long time. Elder Roval, he said finally, has proposed a cultural exchange program. Human diplomatic liaisons embedded with Verith observer teams. Verith academic staff spending periods on human stations. He paused. He cited your sessions as the foundation of the proposal. She raised an eyebrow. That was fast. He is old, Drevackle said. I think he has been waiting for a reason for a long time. She smiled, small, real. I hope it happens. It will, he said. He is very difficult to argue with. They stood in the corridor for another moment. The old station hummed around them, indifferent to the fact that something had changed. Safe travel, Drevackle, she said. He placed his hand flat-palmed against the wall beside him. The Verith gesture she had learned meant formal acknowledgement. Then he walked back toward his side of the station. 3 weeks later, Nora was back at her desk on a human station 2 systems away. The cultural exchange proposal was working through both councils, slowly but moving. Suri had submitted his application for the full diplomatic training program and had sent her a message that said only, I didn't look at the transfer form once. She was reviewing a new assignment brief when a message arrived. No sender name. Verith encryption routing, which meant it had taken some effort to reach her outside official channels. That IT contained 4 words. How does one grieve? She read it twice. Then she set the brief aside, opened a response, and began to write. Not a short answer, a real one. The kind that took time and care and the willingness to say true things plainly. She wrote for a long time, because that was what she did. Not fighting, not winning, not strategies or leverage or countermeasures, just presence, just honesty, just the quiet, persistent, deeply human act of staying in the room with something difficult and refusing to leave until it had been fully heard. Against that, across all the cold and frightened space between species, there was no defense. There never had been.